remarkable day. Turn with me to Psalm 94. Psalm 94, I'm going to read this in the New Living Translation. I thought this was a psalm that was particularly relevant to today. O Lord, the God of vengeance, O God of vengeance, let your glorious justice shine forth. Arise, O Judge of the earth, give the proud what they deserve. How long, O Lord, how long will the wicked be allowed to gloat? How long will they speak with arrogance? How long will these evil people boast? They crush your people, Lord, abusing and afflicting those you claim as your own. They kill widows, foreigners, and murder orphans, the people who aren't in all the people who aren't in the protected class, the governing class. The Lord isn't looking, they say, and besides, the God of Israel doesn't care. Think again, you senseless, stupid ones among the people. When will you catch on? Is he deaf, the one who made your ears? Is he blind, the one who formed your eyes? He punishes the nations. Won't he punish you? He knows everything. Doesn't he know what you're doing? The Lord knows people's thoughts. He knows they are worthless. Joyful are those you discipline, Lord, those whom you teach your instructions. Give them the power to calm themselves and find peace in the days of adversity, giving them relief from troubled times until a pit is dug to bury the wicked. The Lord will not reject his people. He will not abandon his special possession. Judgment will again be founded on justice, and those with virtuous hearts will pursue it. Who will protect me from the wicked? Who will stand up for me against evildoers? Unless the Lord had helped me, I would soon have settled in the silence of the grave. I cried out, I am slipping. But your unfailing love, O Lord, supported me. When doubts filled my mind, your comfort gave me renewed hope and cheer. Can unjust leaders claim God is on their side? Leaders whose decrees permit injustice? Or as the ESV says it, can wicked rulers be allied with you, those who frame injustice by law, by statute, ordinance, or mandate? Verse 21. They gang up against the righteous and condemned the innocent to death. But the Lord is my fortress. My God is the mighty rock where I hide. God will turn the sins of evil people back on them. He will destroy them for their sins. The Lord our God will destroy them. Turn with me to Psalm 31. This is a Psalm of David. Psalm 31. I'm going to read this one in the Holman Christian Standard Bible. Lord, I seek refuge in you. Never let me be disgraced. Save me by your righteousness. Listen closely to me. Rescue me quickly. Be a rock of refuge for me, a mountain fortress to save me. For you are my rock and my fortress. You lead and guide me because of your name. You will free me from the net that is secretly set for me. For you are my refuge. Into your hand I entrust my spirit. You redeem me, Lord God of truth. I hate those who are devoted to worthless things, but I trust in the Lord. I will rejoice and be glad in your faithful love, because you have seen my affliction. You have known the troubles of my life. You have not handed me over to the enemy. You have set my feet in a spacious place. Let's drop down to verse 13. That's Psalm 31, verse 13. I have heard the slander of many. Terror is on every side. When they conspired against me, they plotted to take my life. Of course, this is David who wrote this, and he and his family were run from King Saul and his government for years. Verse 14, but I trust in you, Lord. I say, you are my God. The course of my life is in your power. Deliver me from the power of my enemies and from my persecutors. Show your favor to your servant. Save me by your faithful love. Lord, do not let me be disgraced when I call on you. Let the wicked be disgraced, and let them dwell silently in Sheol, the place of the grave. Let lying lips be quieted. Verse 18. Let lying lips be quieted. They speak arrogantly against the righteous with pride and contempt. How great is your goodness that you have stored up for those who fear you, and accomplished in the sight in everyone for those who take refuge in you. You hide them in the protection of your presence. You conceal them in a shelter from the schemes of men, from quarrelsome tongues. May the Lord be praised, for he has wonderfully shown his faithful love to me in a city under siege. In my alarm I said, I am cut off in your sight, but you heard the sound of my pleading when I cried to you for help. Verse 23, love the Lord, all his faithful ones. The Lord protects the loyal, but fully repays the arrogant. Be strong and courageous, all you who put your hope in the Lord. Now let's turn to Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 16. Remember, as God has done, has said, he is going to deliver us from the power of our enemies. And he has good things in mind for us, but he has things he wants us to avoid in our lives. Proverbs 6:16. These 6 things the Lord hates. Indeed, 7 are repulsive to him. A proud look, that is, the attitude that makes one overestimate oneself and discount others. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that creates wicked plans, feet that run swiftly to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, or even half-truths, and one who stirs up arguments, discord, and fights within a family. In this particular passage in Proverbs, a lying tongue and a false witness, it's talking about, it comes from the Hebrew word, the Strong's 8267, is sheker, deception, falsehood. Of course, and there's also the meaning of disappointment, because deception and falsehood lead to disappointment, of course. And of course, what do we know about sheker, deception, falsehood? In Exodus 20, verse 16, in the 10 Commandments, I'll read the New Living Translation version here, it says, you must not testify falsely against your neighbor. Yeah, you can't, employ sheker, you can't deception and falsehood, against your neighbor. Proverbs 19:9, and this is the Good News translation, puts it this way. It says, no one who tells lies in court can escape punishment. He is doomed. In many ways, a lot of commentators have looked at the 10 Commandments and the commandment, you must not testify falsely, you shall not give false witness against your neighbor. And they look at it as a court experience, okay? But of course, from God's standpoint, we're all on trial at all times in our lives. And in his presence, why do people tell lies? Why do people believe lies? It's simple questions. They ought to have simple answers, but sometimes, life's just not so simple. Some of the commonly shared motivations for telling lies, according to one of the considered authorities or experts in psychology about that, Dr. Paul Ekman, he's a pretty famous clinical psychologist. He puts it this way. One of the first thing that he puts on his why do people tell lies, he says, to avoid being punished. Now, any school teacher knows this is the most this is a frequent motivation. A child, you ask a teacher, they'll hear lies all day long. Why did you do this, or whatever it might be, and they'll deny and they'll lie and whatever. But it's adults are just children growing big. It's important to note, that from Ekman's position, there's no significant differences for lies told to avoid punishment for a purposeful misdeed versus an honest mistake as far as the reaction of the person. Proverbs 19, verse 5, contemporary English version, puts it this way: dishonest witnesses and liars won't escape punishment. So if you want to avoid punishment, eventually you do better not to lie. Sometimes, it's better just to own up. I remember even when I was in junior high school or whatever, they would, teachers put an emphasis on, okay, you did this wrong, own up to it. If it was an honest mistake, there's nothing really there. But however, if it's something where you've been deceitful or whatever, there could be a punishment attached. But generally, you couldn't pull the wool over the teachers during my time in school anyways. They seem to clue into us pretty quickly. Another reason why people tell lies is to obtain a reward not otherwise readily obtainable. Well, what does that mean? This is the second most commonly mentioned motive for telling a lie, by both children and adults. To obtain a reward, you might lie because otherwise you're not going to get what you want. An example of this, of course, is falsely claiming a work experience or an accomplishment, or I did this during a job interview. Of course, this is a major problem. Is resume inflation. This is so widely known that it's almost these resumes and all this has almost become okay. Here's what they say. Let's sort through it. Is any of it true? And to figure it out. Even during this time, there's nothing new about this. You lie to gain something you otherwise couldn't get. Proverbs Chapter 20, verse 17, the Amplified Bible puts it this way: food gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterwards his mouth will be filled with gravel. And it's just as sin may be sweet at first, but the consequences later on bring despair, bring heartache, bring misery. I still remember one of the times a friend of mine in the church many years ago said, well, it's, what you may put down on some of these things, to get a job is one thing, but then you got to produce. And if you don't have the wherewithal, you can't produce. Of course, this is a problem sometimes, especially when you get to some of the STEM experiences. If you're dealing with electricity or power, nuclear reactors, or whatever it might be, you can't. You better know what you're doing. Otherwise, somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody might get killed. Proverbs 12:19, Good News Translation, says, a lie has a short life, but truth lives on forever. The Message puts that same verse, Proverbs 12:19, the truth lasts. Lies are here today, gone tomorrow. Here today and gone tomorrow. Proverbs 24:14, Amplified Bible, says, like clouds and wind without rain is a man who boasts falsely of his gifts, things that he doesn't really have. It's like clouds. You look up, especially in the sky, and many people in the American Southwest or West are they look at all the clouds. They wish they had rains. And when you look up those clouds and you're wishing for the rain, remember, as a man who boasts falsely about his gifts is just like those worthless clouds up there. It isn't bringing any moisture. Now, another reason why people oftentimes will lie, a motive for lying, is to protect another person from being punished. And this is, we've seen this happen. People among coworkers or friends, family, sometimes you'll lie to people, lie even to protect strangers. Sometimes people protect, and closely related to this is a motive to lie to protect oneself from physical harm. Now, it's a bit different from being lying to protect yourself from being punished. But from this standpoint, if you're lying because you're afraid of being harmed, that's not because you're doing a misdeed. It's because you're fearful, and you may have good reason to be fearful of this. Surprisingly, the Bible actually has a couple good accounts of this. Turn with me to Genesis chapter 12 and verse 10. Genesis chapter 12 and verse 10. And there was a famine in the land. So Abram, this was before he became Abraham, before God had enough confidence in him to call him Abraham. He went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine in the land was severe. Remember, he was a pastoralist. He had sheep and cows and things. And if there's no grass, your animals are going to die. Their milk production is going to cut off. What are you going to have? You're going to lose your whole stake. It's just like a lot of farmers in the western in Canada, both in Saskatchewan and in Alberta, especially the southern parts of the provinces, or places in the United States of America, these states, they didn't have much in the way of rain. They didn't have the hay, and so they had a famine. So what are you going to do if you only have so much money? Well, these days they'll try to sell off their herd as fast or bring it down to what they can't afford to feed. Anyways, there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, he said, "Look, I know what a beautiful woman you are." It's kind of like if that rock song, if you're married to a beautiful woman, you're watching everybody. No wonder, everybody's going to try to get her. Okay, it's like that old rock song that they had in. Anyways, look, I know you're a beautiful woman, how beautiful you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, "This is his wife," and they will kill me, but let you live. Please say you're my sister, so it will go well for me because of you, and my life will be spared. My life will be spared on your account. So Abraham is lying. He's going to lie here to protect himself from physical harm. And Sarai, you're going to see, is going to join in on this to protect her husband from being harmed. When Abram entered Egypt, sure enough, the Egyptians saw the woman was very beautiful, and Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her to Pharaoh. So the woman was taken into Pharaoh's household. I take it there wasn't much choice here, I mean, after all, you're coming in. You're an illegal alien, if you were. You're crossing the Nile River as like the Rio Grande, and you come in, and if you're not one of the natives of the land, you don't have any rights. Do you? You're subject to being misused and abused and everything else. So the woman was taken to Pharaoh's household. He treated Abram well because of her, and Abram acquired flocks and herds, male and female donkeys, male and female slaves, and camels. But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his household with severe plagues because of Abram's wife Sarai. Abram didn't have the power to protect himself in a society in which he was just a sojourner, resident alien, coming in. But God took his part because he had a relationship with Abram. And of course, God also did this. He knew Abram was human. He wasn't at that point where his faith had grown sufficiently strong. So God intervened. So Pharaoh sent for, he plagued. The Lord struck Pharaoh and his household with severe plagues. It doesn't say what it was, but obviously it was something that got Pharaoh's attention and all the attention of his household. It's a very personal thing, whatever it was. So Pharaoh sent for Abram. Maybe he had a soothsayer said, "Hey, they looked at this and, oh, what's going on? What's new? Oh, she's new. It's the woman." "What have you done to me?" Pharaoh said to Abram. "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife?" Could you imagine, everything that went on? They said, "Who are you really?" They came out and "Why did you say she's my sister? So I took her as my wife. Now here is your wife. Take her and go." Then Pharaoh gave his men orders about him and sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Don't touch this guy. They were so superstitious enough or whatever that they, followed up on that. And from this aspect, it wasn't that long. People knew some of these basic. There are these things. You shall not commit adultery. You don't take another man's wife. That was common knowledge in the culture of the time. They knew from history that civilization, society wasn't going to work very well if everybody was taking everybody as other's wife. That's going to bound to fighting and conflict But it's interesting, this motive of protecting another person from being punished or for protecting oneself from physical harm. Abram's son, Isaac, had the same situation happen. Genesis 26, verse 1, Holman Christian Standard Bible. And there was another famine in the land in addition to one that occurred at Abraham's time. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines at Gerar. So it's right there in the area that we might be talking about these days, close to the Gaza Strip, Ashkelon, this area in the Promised Land. And the Lord appeared to him and said to Isaac, don't go down to Egypt. You're not going to do it's not going down there. Your dad was down there. I already have I have a story about that. And the Lord, don't go down to Egypt. Live in the land that I now would tell you about. Stay in this land as a foreigner, and I will be with you and bless you. See, we have to wait for what is God saying? How is God directing? Where do you do it? What is the timing? Circumstances meant he had to do something because again there was a drought. And he inherited all his father's flocks and herds. For I will give these lands to you and your offspring, and I will confirm the oath that I swore to your father Abraham, and I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky, and I will give your offspring all these lands, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by your offspring. So he's reaffirming the covenant that he had made with his father Abraham to him. Why? Verse 5. Because Abraham listened to my voice and kept my mandate, my commands, my statutes, and my instructions. That was what faith, this was part of what faith was all about. This is what loving God was all about. So it says here, verse 6, so Isaac settled in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, Rebekah, probably a redhead, he said, she's my sister. And for he was afraid to say, my wife, thinking the men of the place will kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is a beautiful woman. When Isaac had been there for some time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked down from the window and was surprised to see Isaac caressing his wife Rebekah. Abimelech sent for Isaac and said, so, she is really your wife. How could you say, she is my sister? And Isaac answered him, because I thought I might die on her account. You see, he lied to protect himself from physical harm. That was his motivation. This is what he thought. Again, Isaac, sometimes the world is right there on top of it. And his faith wasn't perfected, and he had his dad's example. I'm sure he heard the story. Then Abimelech said, what is this you've done to us? One of the people could easily have slept with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us. So Abimelech warned all the people with these words, whoever harms this man or his wife will certainly die. So now he had some support. It's amazing, God, works for good for those who love him, and whatever the circumstances. Now, you notice in the scriptures, these stories don't cast a serious blemish on either Abraham or Isaac's character from God's perspective, ultimately. While the Bible doesn't praise Abraham or Isaac for the discrepancy between their words and the facts of the matter, nevertheless, from God's perspective, the measure of Abraham and Isaac's truthfulness, their verbal accuracy, was not to be compared with their consistency in pursuing their relationship and purposes of God, of living and loving what he was telling them and following it. It's interesting, in the Old Covenant, these examples, and in the New Covenant scriptures, both the Hebrew and the Greek scriptures, truth is something that is done as well as something that is said or understood or thought or believed. Let's go to John chapter 17, verse 15. John chapter 17 and verse 15. I'm going to read this in the Message. Eugene Peterson's, it's a paraphrase, but no, I like the way he puts it. I know I read it all the time in either the Coulter or the King James or whatever. It's nice to get a fresh perspective. John 17, verse 15. Jesus speaking during the Last Supper, before he was going to suffer and be crucified. Now I'm returning to you. He's praying to the Father. Now I'm pertaining to you, Holy Father. I'm saying these things in the world's hearing, so my people can experience my joy completed in them. I gave them your word, Jesus is saying. The godless world hated them, his disciples, his people, because of it. Because they don't join the world's ways. God's people, don't join the world's ways. Just as I didn't join the world's ways, Jesus said. I'm not asking that you take them out of the world, but that you guard them from the evil one. And there is an evil one who's constantly working and motivating the children of disobedience in this world. They are no more defined by the world than I am defined by the world. Make them holy, that is, consecrated, set apart for God's use, with the truth. Make them holy with the truth. Your word is consecrating truth. In the same way that you gave me a mission in the world, I gave them a mission in the world. I'm consecrating myself for their sakes so that they'll be truth consecrated in their mission. Now, the truth is not just something you acknowledge that, oh, yes, this is the truth of this passage or whatever, but it's actually putting it into practice. It's part of what we do. We're living in the truth. R.T. Brooks, a theological writer, puts it this way. I don't want to quote him. The biblical emphasis on truth as something to be done and not just thought or spoken obviously issues no license to tell lies, half-truths, issue prevarications, or deceptively share wishful thinking. The biblical idea of truth concerns a consistent relationship of integrity with God and its eternal reality, because the truth is the way things really are in the universe from a spiritual perspective. The biblical ideal of truth is broader than what many modern people live at the concept of truth to be these days. And it gets even worse these days because people will go around thinking truth is very subjective. My truth, this is not the biblical perspective. Of course, another motivation of why people would lie would be to win the admiration of others. You tell lies to increase your popularity. That they can range from little white lies to enhance the story being told, to create an entirely new fabricated persona. Fishermen tell, it was, and it gets bigger every time you tell a lie for a hunter, or whatever it might be. People do that. People do that all the time. And they do it, and oftentimes they do it is because of low self-esteem. They want to impress, they want to please, they want to tell someone what they think they want to hear. You can sometimes... this people of low self-esteem. You think about Saul. He did things to please others, and he didn't tell them necessarily fully all of what maybe needed to be done because he wanted to please them. But he wasn't living the truth and being, with integrity with God, actually doing what he was told. Motivation for lying, of course, is to get out of awkward social situations. People might say, they'll come up with a lie just to, okay, I want to exit this party. My babysitter needs to leave, emergency, whatever it is. People will lie because of that sort of thing, or to avoid some sort of an embarrassment. Sometimes, like if a child, They get off a trip and they get off the car seat in the back, and whatever, and it's all wet. They'll say, I spilled my water bottle or something, rather than I wet my pants. Of course, most parents will tell them, that's not the case. But people sometimes will lie to avoid embarrassment or to get out of an awkward social situation. We find this even in the scriptures, from this standpoint. Genesis 18 and verse 9. Genesis 18 verse 9. Now, when Abraham was there, I think he was in somewhere in the area of the northern part of the Judean wilderness, north of Beersheba, where we would see now, close to the Jordan River Valley. Anyways, he had a visit one day in the heat of the day. The story is he saw three people coming up. And Abraham, being the hospitable person in the Middle East, he showed hospitality. He made them a meal. And after they ate, and it sat there for a while under the shade of, I guess, an oak tree, these men said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" Now, Abraham would have been clued in and at this point in time, how did they know my wife's name and all these other things? And he said, because you get the picture, you have the tent, big Bedouin tent, what you would think of, and he's sitting in by front of the tent door, and that's where they were eating, okay, which is where you would. Everybody's sitting on the ground, and so you have the tent and you have a curtain, because of, this is the way things are done in the Middle East. Still are done in many ways same time. And the men asked, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" If you do this in Saudi Arabia, it's still an awkward question. And he said, "Oh, they're in the tent." And he said, the main speaker said, "I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son." By this time, Abraham is clued in on who he was speaking with. He had a pretty good idea at this point in time. And Sarah was listening at the tent door, which was behind him, because she was curious. She wanted to listen to this. Being social, she couldn't, as a woman, sit with all these men eating, not Middle Eastern custom. So she was listening at the tent door, which was behind Abraham. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in years. I think she was about 90, somewhere at this point in time. Abraham was older than that. And she was past the age of childbearing, long past. So Sarah laughed to herself when she heard that the Lord's words, saying, "After I have become old, shall I have pleasure and delight, my Lord, my husband, being also old?" I mean, it had been so many years that God had promised them children, a son or daughters, a seed. And they had waited and waited and waited. And the whole story. They even had this whole thing. They had to Abraham, with Abraham, one of Sarah's handmaids. Maybe I can get a child, by a surrogate method. But that wasn't it. Then the Lord asked Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh to herself, saying, 'Shall I really give birth to a child when I am so old? Is anything too difficult or too wonderful for the Lord?' At the appointed time, when the season for her delivery comes, I will return to you and Sarah, and will have a son." Then Sarah denied it, saying, "I did not laugh," because she was afraid. She was afraid. Social embarrassment, or fear of the fact that she recognized that this was God. But he, the Lord, said, "No, but you did laugh." Of course, this became the name of Isaac, laughter. So it became a family joke, from this standpoint. Did God, did it permanently impugn her character because she lied because she was afraid? Sometimes, of course, people will lie, motivation to lie, to maintain privacy without notifying others of their intention. One example might say, okay, we're going to elope because we don't want to pay for the wedding. But, the real problem is we really don't want our families getting together. Because if they do, it's going to be, like one family maybe is strong anti-vaxxer, the other are vaxxers, and no, it's not, no, it isn't going to work. So maybe they'll do it something like that. Most of those things, God can work with. They aren't permanently impugning your character necessarily. But there are those people who lie to exercise power over others, because they will control and manipulate the, the information that they want their target to hear or know. Adolf Hitler was famous for that. He would, and lying to exercise power over others is probably the most dangerous and the most heinous motives for telling lies. Let's go to Proverbs 26 and verse 28. Proverbs 26 and verse 28, Amplified Bible. A lying tongue hates those it wounds and crushes, and a flattering mouth works ruin. See, people, these people who want to exercise power, who want to get something from others, and they, God is saying their lies is they're doing it because they hate those that they're telling the lies to. They're looking to take advantage of them, to manipulate them, to control them. He also compares it like to weapons, those lies. Proverbs 25, verse 18, Amplified Bible version. Like a club and a sword and a piercing arrow is the man who testifies falsely, who presents lies, to deceptions to his neighbor, to his acquaintance, to those, who, his people that maybe he's ruling. Such people, are trying to control the situation. They're trying to exert influence. They're trying to push people to get the reactions that they want. The actual truth, the real data might be inconvenient because it doesn't conform to the narrative they are trying to push on people. So they lie. They're not concerned for others. They're lying because of their own self-interest. And as they do that, they want to protect the secret that they, have. They want to protect. They don't want to show others what their real motive is. When people lie to you, they try to conceal their emotions. They put on an act, put on a little drama skit, But oftentimes, there are even psychologists these days who've studied this, who say, there will be gives. There will be something that you can see evident on another person's face. Of course, this is nothing new. If you play poker, the best card sharks can read the other faces around the table to figure out whether they should, what they can do. Politicians do the same thing. If you suspect someone might be lying to you in person, you can't do it with your leaders, of course. If you suspect someone might be lying to you, but you're not sure, one way might be to ask them, when they say something, you might ask them the why question. To answer why, it's much more difficult for someone with them. They ask why, to lie about why something or something happened rather than it is, basic facts. Why? You might try that. If someone struggles to explain their intentions, could be a big red flag for you that they are lying to you. They can't give you a good, reason that really sounds plausible to you. And the experts in the field, and there even been a TV series on this, you can look for clusters of signals in trying to spot liars. They include, people, this is a classic, avoiding eye contact or shifty eyes. He's a shifty eye person. Stuttering, pausing, clearing the throat. changing voice tone or volume, offering multiple excuses for a situation instead of just one, standing in a defensive posture with the arms crossed over the chest, reddening slightly on the face or neck, rubbing, stroking, or pulling on the nose, making a slip of the tongue while denying something, deflecting attention from the issue, appearing uncomfortable. Some of these things you have to be careful, and you got to watch very carefully, because oftentimes they're very fast. They say some of these things, and the people can't necessarily, psychologists will say they can't hide it fully. They will slip. Their body will give a slip for a brief, very instantaneous, not even 1 second or half a second, you'll see something. Then they have whole courses to train people to pick out this sort of thing. Now, some people's motivation to lie and say deceitful things or lies is because they might actually want the lie to be true. Sometimes the best con artists are the ones who believe their own stories. I've known con artists, a really good one actually a number of years ago, and she believed her own stories. That's made her so effective in telling lies to people to get other people to believe it. A liar, such a type of a motivational liar, they want their lie to be true so badly that, that it overwhelms their instinct to tell the truth. Now, Gandhi was supposedly say, be the change you want to see in the world. He never actually said that, but such liars will say, things, and they hope that they can make something come true by repeating the lie over and over and over again, hoping that it will come to pass. In today's environment of alternative facts, it's not hard to see, this sort of thing going on. Now, some people also, when they do this, and this is even a problem, the police know this, courts know it, that, some people, when they lie, their memories will actually change. They'll report something, they'll actually think it's true when it's a lie, because they'll actually convince themselves enough that they'll alter their memories. Researchers in psychology sometimes believe in such a case, telling lies wields the same power as the imagination to alter actual memories. So your memory can be a lie because you want something to happen so much, you rewrite your memory of what actually was there. But all lying, whatever it might be, has consequences. Especially when you lie to someone, significant other, it affects how that person will deal with you forever after that. You've lost trust. If your spouse lies, you may have to work it out in therapy. But if an employer lies to you, or you lie to an employer, there's not likely to be much forgiveness there. Secular psychologists often say there are many considerations that come into play when deciding whether honesty is the best policy. See, that's the way our world is right now. And they'll actually say this and teach this. Now they'll ask, was anybody harmed if I withhold a bit of the truth? So they're judging, is somebody going to be harmed? Now, there might be something to that. I still have the story of a friend who, during World War II, the story was this person was in southern France, and he had a place out in the country, and he was hiding Jews from the Nazis to keep them from being murdered. And one of his neighbors, jealous of him or whatever, had a long-term grudge, betrayed him to the Gestapo. And so the Germans showed up at his door. Now, the Germans had a problem being in France during World War II. They had more denunciations than they knew what to do with. And they realized a lot of French people would denounce a neighbor because they coveted their house or they coveted their wife or whatever it might be, they wanted to eliminate this person. So the Nazis eventually became, astute enough to realize that people were just using them to get rid of their enemies. So anyways, the Gestapo shows up at this fellow's house, and he's hiding Jews, all sorts of Jews. So they knock on the door. Man, how they do it. The Jews here. And the guy, with a flash of brilliance, said, "Are the Jews here?" "Oh, are also, the place is full of Jews. They're all over the place. Come in. Let me show you all the Jews I'm hiding. And he starts going, I guess he has a 3-floor house, which is kind of typical in old France, that part during World War. Anyway, in the village. And so he starts going from room to room, opening a closet door. Oh, see, it's full of Jews. Go to a bedroom, look under the bed. There's full of Jews. And he's doing this. He goes to the first floor. He goes up to the second floor. He's putting on this thing. By the time they get to the second floor, the German officer in charge of this is just enough. Enough, we got other things to do. And they left. The Jews were on the third floor of his house. He was, in some ways, he was deceiving them, but there was a reason, he didn't want to have these people hurt because in many ways, he didn't want, there were no Jews in his house for them to murder. That's what he was saying, and that's true according to God. He might have deceived them, but that he was deceiving them to protect these other people because there were no Jews there for them to murder. Now, also sometimes we have to, as far as telling the truth, truth can sometimes hurt. Scriptures do talk, we should speak the truth in love. And sometimes, we have to ask ourselves, because sometimes, the truth can hurt. But, withholding it, can someone change and grow from honest feedback? And how I deliver it, am I being unnecessarily blunt by giving an honest opinion that might be hurtful? How do I do it? And if the position was reversed, how would it feel if someone withheld the truth from me under similar circumstances? And if you avoid telling the truth in some cases, in some situations, it could be an act of cowardice. But it could also be an act of compassion. You have to ask your question, what is the purpose? We are to speak the truth in love. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 8. Let's take a look here in the last days of prophecy. Most people don't think of the New Covenant scriptures as prophecy, and the Apostle Paul as a prophet, but he is. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8, Amplified Bible Version. Then the lawless one, the Antichrist, will be revealed, and the Lord will slay him with the breath of his mouth, and bring him to an end by the appearance of his coming. The coming of the Antichrist, the lawless one, is through the activity of Satan, because Satan is the original liar. And in this Antichrist, he's going to be part of how he's deceiving people is he has all these he has this great power, all kind of counterfeit miracles and deceptive signs and false wonders. They're all lies. They're all deceits. They're all shekers. All of them. In verse 10, Thessalonians 2, verse 10, and by the unlimited seduction to evil, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who are perishing because they did not welcome the love of the truth of the gospel, the truth of the revelation of God. They didn't welcome, they weren't looking for it, they didn't want it, desire it so much, so as to be saved. They preferred, it was more comfortable to be spiritually blind. So they would end up rejecting the truth, turning their backs on it to save them. The truth, which in the Old Covenant, in the Hebrew word, this truth is an attitude of consistency. This in both what we say and what we do, which is, of course, what God is himself. He is the truth. He is consistent with both what he says. What he says is what he is. Biblical truth has to always be supported by an inward integrity and all-around dependability of the believer. people should be able to come to us and ask us these things, and we'll give them sound advice. We'll give them knowledge. We will not lie to them and deceive them. We will speak the truth in love, not in hate, not in anger, but in love. Because they did not welcome the love of the truth so as to be saved, but because of this, because these people didn't welcome the love of the truth, God will send upon them a misleading influence, an activity that leads them into error and deception, so they will believe the lie in order to be judged and condemned, who did not believe the truth, but instead took pleasure in unrighteousness, because that was more convenient to them. It was less painful. It was what they wanted. The Expanded Bible version says of the Antichrist, he will use every kind of evil to trick, to deceive those who are perishing, because it's a process. Because they refuse to love the truth that would save them. For this reason, God sends them something powerful that leads them away from the truth, so they will believe a lie. They'll go down rabbit holes. New Living Translation puts this, verse 10, he will use the Antichrist every kind of evil deception to fool those on their way to destruction, because they refuse to love and accept the truth that would save them. So God will cause them to be greatly deceived, and they will believe these lies. You can see this, how this works. The God in the Old Covenant, the Lord did this several times. 1 Kings 22, verse 2, this whole story about when Ahab, when it was time for him to die, how are we going to persuade him? And God said, he had this spirit that came and said, I'll go out and I'll be a lying spirit in some of the mouth of his false prophets. Ahab listens to all these false prophets of Baal and Asherah and whatever, of Jezebel's, crew. So I will be in one of them, and I'll give him some false information, and he'll go up and get killed in battle. God can he can allow, because there are plenty of tarnished spirits that will be happy to play the game of providing false information and deception. Ezekiel 14:9 is about that. Even in Revelation 17:17, God allows it to put in the hearts of those who are to fulfill their, the end time description of what he said needs to be done. He'll allow the deceptions and lies to work on these people in a way that he feels it is necessary to accomplish as well. But God wants us to avoid falsehood, lies, deceit. Let's go to Revelation 21, verse 5, because there's an ultimate cost. Revelation 21:5, Holman Christian Standard Bible. Then the one seated on the throne said, look, I'm making everything new. He also said, write, because these words are faithful and true. And he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I give water as a gift to the thirsty from the spring of life. The victor will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But the cowards, unbelievers, vile, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their share will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. So Paul said this in Ephesians 4. Let's go to Ephesians 4 and verse 14. He counsels the church, and he said this, so that we are no longer children, that is, spiritually immature, tossed back and forth like ships on a stormy sea, carried about by every wind of shifting doctrine, by the cunning and tricking of unscrupulous men, by the deceitful scheming of people ready to do anything for their personal profit, but speaking the truth in love. Ephesians 4:15, speaking the truth in love in all things, both in our speech and our lives, expressing his truth, as the Amplified notes. Let us grow up in all things into him, That is, following his example, who is the head, Christ. Verse 25. Therefore, rejecting all falsehood, whether lying, defrauding, telling half-truths, spreading rumors, any of these things, trying to feather our own nest, to put forward, to manipulate, to control other people. Speak truth, each one with his neighbor, for we are all parts of one another. Speak truth, speaking the truth in love. The interesting thing is, in Greek, in the inspired scriptures, it's just one word. Truthing. It's Strong's 226, elethuo, speaking reality into a person's life, speaking the truth, making a record of what God deems is true, what God deems as reality or fact. Literally, it's to truth as a verb. And it includes, as the lexicon says, spirit-led confrontation where it is vital to tell the truth so others can live God's reality rather than personal illusion, delusion, a lie. We don't want people to live a lie. Why do we believe According to Diane Barth, a psychotherapist, she says, denying reality, denying the truth, not crediting something we know to be true, is a way that we think will unconsciously protect ourselves from pain, the pain of having been caught up in an untruth. She says, as a psychotherapist, I learned that it's not unusual for people to believe someone even when they have substantial proof that they are being lied to. Examples include parents who believe their children are not taking drugs even after finding a stash in the child's sock drawer, lovers who insist that their partner is faithful despite unfamiliar underpants in the laundry, and business partners who believe that financial losses are for some unexplained reason other than that their best friend is stealing from them. And Dr. Paul Ekman, who I already talked about, in his book Telling Lies, also found that we want to believe that someone is telling the truth, especially when that person is emotionally or psychologically important to us. It is painful to believe that someone we care about or trust is lying to us and is knowing that we cannot trust them. This is a part of the problem we have with governments right now. A lot of people don't want to believe our governments just lie to us. Our leaders are lying to us. Denial of reality or not crediting something we know to be true in some part of our brain is a way we unconsciously protect ourselves from this pain. Barth says, Diane Barth, she says, we believe lies when we feel too vulnerable to allow the truth and its consequences to manifest itself in our lives. When truth does emerge, we often feel terribly betrayed, and we can lose faith in our own ability to make good judgments. To protect ourselves against this pain, we sometimes continue lying to ourselves long after reality seems unavoidable. Now, if you're a third party and someone is, lying to themselves, they're believing lies, getting angry or pointing out reality as you see it will not necessarily move someone off their denial. You can help, but you can't do it. You can't make someone see the truth if they want to remain, blinded and willing to believe a lie. What the best thing you can do is let them know that you're ready and willing to talk to them about the perspective of, what is the truth, what is, that will help them. But oftentimes you find they might reject you right now, but they might turn to you later for support when something comes and they are ready to go through whatever emotional pain they need to do to come to confront themselves with the truth and actually act on it. That's why sometimes people will believe a lie. Let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 1. 2 Timothy 3 and verse 1. Again, Paul here, Expanded Bible Version. Paul the prophet. Remember this, know this. In the last days there will be many troubles. Terrible times, because people will love themselves, love money, be boasters, braggers, be proud, be arrogant. They'll say evil things against one another. It's going to speak abusively. They're going to blaspheme. Will not obey parents or be thankful or be kind to people. They will not love others and will refuse to forgive. Will gossips and slander. Will not control themselves. They will be cruel. Will hate what is good. Will turn against their friends. Will do foolish things without thinking. Will be conceited. Will love pleasure instead of God. Will act as if they serve God, but they won't have, or they're going to deny his power. They're going to be hypocritical. They're actually not going to do. They want to look good, but they don't want to do good. Not real good, not the way the scriptures say it. Stay away from these people, Paul said. To some of them, however, these people they'll undermine the church if you allow them to sit there and come into the church. Verse 7, well, let's go. Some people can never understand. He makes this point. These women are always learning, seeking out new teachings, but they never are able to understand or arrive at the truth fully. Then he gives a historical example, just as Jannes and Jambres were against Moses. They were some of Pharaoh's magicians. These people are against the truth. There are people who are against the truth. Their thinking has been ruined. That is, their minds, their thoughts are corrupted. They've become depraved. They have failed in trying to follow the faith. They're teaching a counterfeit faith. But they will not succeed in what they do, for everyone is going to see their folly or their ignorance. They would be lying for themselves because, that's what they want. They'll believe their own lies so much they'll be completely sold on it. But Paul says here in verse 10 to the brethren, but you have followed what I teach, the way I live, my goal, my purpose in life, faith, patience, love. You know I never give up. You know how I have been hurt and have suffered. Paul went through all sorts of persecution. As in Antioch and Iconium and Lystra, 3 places where he got beaten and suffered. I have suffered persecutions, but the Lord saved or delivered or rescued me from these troubles. Indeed, everyone who wants to live as God desires, in a godly manner, in Christ Jesus, will be persecuted. That's a hard thing to sometimes understand, but we understand that maybe now more than we might have 50 years ago. But people who are evil and cheat others, impostors, charlatans, will go from bad to worse. They will fool others and they will be fooling themselves. Deceiving and being deceived is the way King James puts it. They are going to be deceiving and being deceived because they want to believe something else. But you should continue following the teachings you learn. For you know and are confident they are true because you trust those who taught you. So you've got to know who you're listening to, who the nature of the people is someone you're listening to. Since you were a child, you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise, and that wisdom leads to salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. And that faith teaches us to speak the truth in love. Sometimes we have to wait patiently. Because not everybody is at the point where they're willing to accept the truth because it's too painful. Painful for them to realize they've been deceived maybe their entire lives. That they've bought something and now it's costing them and they made a mistake. That's hard to come up with. But you see, that's part of what repentance is, which is an essential step towards It's the first step that we've got, a significant step to make towards salvation, is to repent. We've got to be willing to turn and face the pain. So why do people lie? Why do people believe a lie? Well, let's keep in mind that we don't believe lies, and let's not tell them either. Till next week.